Hello, everyone. Hi.
Hello, everybody.
Hi. Welcome to the sixth webinar of the European Investment Banking with Católica. Today, we're going to talk about a theme I really appreciate, which is learning from failures. And I have a very, very special guest with me. He came from Porto in a train, a 2-hour, well, 3-hour trip from Porto. So first thing, thank you very much, Joe, for being here. I think that your experience can give us some highlights and some insights, which are very good for all the social entrepreneurs and people with projects that are listening to us. And so to start, I would like to give you an idea of what the flow of the session is going to be. First, we're going to do a little intro for you to know a bit more about me and a bit more about Joe. Mm-hmm. After that, with you, we'll do the interview and sharing. We have a specific frame for the questions, which I will explain further on. And then in the end, we open to participants. As we have a limited time, we have to organize and manage our time really well. So that's the reason why we don't open all the webinar to participants. Anyway, if you wanted to leave your questions or say something during the session, please do. And we'll interrupt if you see that we need to interrupt in order to clarify or give you some insight or answer some question you have. So the main takeaways we would like you to take from this webinar are basically first becoming more aware of your failures and mistakes, because sometimes we think we've been talking about it, we've been preparing the webinar and we've been reflecting about our own failures. And one thing that we recognize is that sometimes we don't have conscience that we're making a mistake because we're so full into our project that we don't have the time and the objective view or the bird eye view enough to take an objective look at our project and what we're doing. The second takeaway we want you to bring is that accepting your failures as facts, as simple events that happen in your life without judgment, because we feel that judgment we put in failures we have, either it's failures in our lives or in our projects. The thing that doesn't allow us to learn and to move on and to capitalize on the mistakes or failures we do is basically because we judge ourselves too much and we can't seem to, to bring the best outcomes out of it. And the third takeaway would be like to have a list of some experience-based hints, either from me or from Joe, about what to do, what strategies can we implement regarding new failures to come, to avoid new failures and to deal with the failures we have. So this is basically what we aim to do in this kind of hour that we're going to spend with you. So first things first, I would like to introduce myself. I'm now giving classes of social entrepreneurship. I know some people already know me, but I have to speak to everyone. Hi, Veronica. I can see you there. Hi, Sara. Hi. How are you? Okay, so I give classes of social entrepreneurship in Católica now for undergraduates. I also teach boot camps of social entrepreneurship in INSEAD in Paris together with Philippe and Carlos from Liège. But my life in the social impact area has around 12 years. In 2007, I created a project called Terra dos Sonhos. It was my first venture in the social entrepreneurship world. Today, Terra dos Sonhos is a very, very well-established organization. I no longer work there. I worked after Terra dos Sonhos in another organization called Ashoka, which is the biggest foundation for social entrepreneurship in the world. And after Ashoka, I accepted to be the new CEO of Junior Achievement Portugal. Junior Achievement is an education organization who works with entrepreneurship, financial literacy, citizenship, and capabilities for employability. So this has been my path in the social impact world. But before that, I was an entrepreneur. I had around 7 or 8 ventures. And I also worked in the corporate world, namely in a bank called BCP. So I have several experiences of failure Of course, I'm not going into my personal failures because it's not the place to do it. But I've been learning to deal with failures in a different way along these years. So this is going to be an interview to Joe, but I'll be sharing my experiences as well. So now, Joe, please.
Cool. Hello, everybody.
Stage is yours.
My name is Joe, and a little bit about my background. I was brought up in American schools in Spain, and I've been living in 4 different cultures: in the North American culture, Spanish culture, German culture, and Portuguese culture. I used to believe that what I wanted to do is to make a lot of money and have a bunch of companies. And I actually succeeded in some way in having that and making more money than I needed. Until I entered into the home of autism. And this was the most magic moment of my life, because then I realized that pursuing money or just making money is, it's okay, but there are things that are way more worth it, right? And that's what autism has taught me. And we just going for a different objective than just making money. It's trying to make a better world, in this case, in the world of autism and people that are different, let's say. And okay, so I just founded with my wife, Vencer Autismo. It's an association. What we do is we bring tools and knowledge to parents, to teachers, to anybody that deals with autism in their daily life, so that they can understand their children, a different understanding that what is known traditionally about autism. Autism is seen like something terrible and something you can't, these people are, out of this world. That's not true. They're really so focused in this world, et cetera, et cetera. And all these learnings just brought so much more richness to my life. And they brought with this experience a bunch of failures too. Okay, so that's why how we get into this into this failure world. I believe I made much more failures when I was in the for-profit world, but that's another story.
I'm sure you did, but you can talk about them as well. They're welcome. Okay, so I have some breaking the ice questions for you. More broad questions about failure and how failure had an influence in your life, and then we can share some insights about that. Mm-hmm. We've met and been friends for some years, and I had the chance to follow your steps along this path for impact with autism. Mm-hmm. And I was with you in some key moments, some successes and some failures, and some frustrations, a lot of frustrations. And I had the chance also to discuss them with you and elaborate on the problems you had, so we can overcome them and transform them into something good. Yeah. Do you think that the failures you had along your way made you a better person or a better entrepreneur, and why?
I do believe failures. Okay, there's a phase. I think we're going to go more deeply into the concept of failure and what we all believe failure means, etc. But in any case, when you have the chance, when the feeling of failure is over, then you can get that helicopter view. And then you have the possibility of taking something positive out of there, right? And saying, okay, we did this, this was a wrong assumption or the wrong step, the wrong thing to do. And in this sense, what has made me, I do believe, a better person and a better entrepreneur, or a better, let's say, person in the collaboration world or in a teamwork world, is realizing that if we're judging ourselves, we're not helping ourselves to evolve or to see the problem, right? And then failure comes as a lesson of humility, right? For you to become a little bit more humble and say, okay, I don't control everything, but I can look at everything and I can assess everything and try to make the best decisions possible. I do believe also that we are always making the best decisions possible, according to what we know, not what we could have done, right? that's easy to see afterwards. But according to what we know and the tools we have and the education we have and what we're living and feeling right now, we're always making the best decision possible. Otherwise, because if we could decide better, we would. But sometimes we don't, right? Because we can't. So we're always doing our best. And I think this is important to understand when we look at failure, not to look at the negative.
So if I understood well, what you're saying is that failure or the mistakes you make, because there's an interesting thing, because failure and mistakes are different, right? Mm-hmm. You can have a failure in your project, which the origin is not in you, mm-hmm. or any mistake you did, right. But it can be based on variables that you don't control, right? Mm-hmm. But what I understood from what you were saying now is that you consider mistakes, errors, or failures levers to be more innovative, yeah. to search for more tools, to get more knowledge, and in that sense, the failure is fundamental for your evolution as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, because you have like the case when, of course, it has to do with resilience as well. Mm-hmm. You have the case, for instance, of Lincoln. He was the president of the United States. Everyone knows Lincoln. But maybe what you don't know is that before he was elected as the president of the United States, he tried to win like 20 or 25 elections, and he didn't win one election. Mm-hmm. And the only election he won was the one that made him president of the United States, and probably one of the best presidents ever in the United States. And I believe that the experience he had dealing with failures all those years until he was around 50 and he became the president made him a very mature person, and to deal and to cope with the obstacles that he faced.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You agree?
Agree.
But can we be more specific on the process you have when you have a failure? Mm. So imagine you have a failure in the project. Then what do you do next?
I cry.
Okay, that's important. What you're saying is like you feel what you have to feel.
Yeah.
Okay. And next, what do you do?
Frustrating. And then depends the size of the failure, right? If it's a big size, then it's getting the team together and saying, okay, well, what are we doing? What's going on? Right, and trying to get more inputs. If it's small failures and big failures also likewise is calling friends like you, calling people that are more experienced than we do, and asking, what would you do? This happened. What's your call, or what would you do, or how do you see this? Just what's your opinion?
And other perspectives.
Yes, absolutely. I use it every time more. I took a long time to realize, because in my for-profit world, I managed to put things running by myself. So I never practiced this thing about asking for help. And now social entrepreneurship gives me the chance to evolve in this sense, yes. And it's, okay, this is not working. I can't deal with it. I don't know, I don't see where the solution is. So, hey Fred, right, and calling some friends, Joe Santos, I've seen he was watching us, some beautiful people that you guys are always encouraging us to keep doing good. And I think just making the call, even if there's no solution coming out of that moment, is already very, it allows us to elevate to that helicopter view, because then we don't have such a sentimental, such a being inside the problem, right?
Yeah, well, in my case, I don't cry, but I get mad. I get furious. I have a lot of fire. So I don't like to fail. Okay, I think nobody likes to fail, and nobody likes to admit mistakes. Mm. So my first reaction is, damn. Yeah. What did I do wrong, right? And then I start thinking and going back, reanalyzing all the process since the beginning, and try to identify which were the variables, in what part of the way did I miss something, or if it wasn't me and it was other variables that I don't control. Yeah. And after doing that, yes, I go to people that are not so attached and so connected emotionally with the project, and try to understand what they would do in such a circumstances. And that's why it's so important to have a network, right? Yeah. It's so important to have mentors, a support network. I remember that when I started the project in 2007, I didn't know about the existence of YES. YES is the Institute for Social Entrepreneurship in Portugal. And I knew about YES in 2009. And I did my first program with YES and INSET in 2011, the EZEP with Felipe Santos. And that was a very good moment because I understood that I wasn't the only crazy man trying to implement a project where I fulfilled the dreams of sick children and with no network or no support network and a bit on the counter-current of everything I'd done before. And until today, I would say that the support network is one of the key elements that helps me go through failures. Okay.
Cool.
Do you think that another question I would like to ask you is, it's okay to recognize failure, but when you think about communicating failures, for instance, you give a lot of talks, you talk to a lot of people. Do you communicate with them? Do you tell them the failures you made and the learnings you made? And if you do that, why do you do that? And are you afraid of the consequences that may have in the way people see your project or yourself as an entrepreneur?
Yes, we communicate failure if it has an educational purpose. So if we can say, we tried this and it didn't work, so now we do this, right? Like it helps people with a story to go through the journey that we went, and we hope that people won't stumble on the same stone. However, it's critical to communicate clearly and very carefully. We spoke last year to 16,000, I don't know how many people, in free conferences about autism, and now we're doing like 1,500 people per month. And you get messages like this woman recently from Porto. She wrote, "Why do you guys say that TV creates hyperactivity in children?" And I'm like, we never said that. But it's so critical to communicate clearly and in a way that nobody gets something misunderstood. And so that's why I would be careful communicating failures, because it can go into, let's say, other institutions that are still in Porto Benfica mode or Barcelona Real Madrid mode, which is we are competitors, right? And that won't help in those circles, right? We're still dealing with trying to change or trying to help different attitudes to come into the ecosystem so that the whole ecosystem can evolve more positively instead of attached to old ways of thinking. So I think it's case by case. You would need to study if you want to communicate some kind of failure. But if it has an educational purpose, I think it's very, very positive. Yes.
Yeah, you talked about competitive markets, but do you think that competition in the world of social impact projects is the same as in the traditional business?
No, absolutely not.
But there are social business working in competitive markets.
Yes, right.
So how would they communicate failure in a positive way? Can you think about an example of how they could do that?
Yes, I think if there's an educational purpose, I think it's simple to just let it in, in a cheerful way. If you're communicating failure, it has to be something that you find actually inspiring and fun, and you want to take all the weight off of it, right? Just the way we communicate about autism, the goal is exactly that autism is not something terrible and gray and dark, right? The same thing with failures. You want to communicate failure and you want to make it fun. You want to say something funny about it, and you want people with the hope or in the aim that they don't go through the same process that we went, that they don't fail.
Could you give us an example of a big failure you had with your project?
Oh yeah.
So
I think the biggest failure was believing that everybody would do what we did. So me and my wife, we went to the United States, we learned the program, we implemented it with Kawi, of course crazy, 32 hours per week, one-on-one, 2 years. And we believed everybody's gonna do this because this helps their children with autism to have less autism. So of course it's obvious, right? Everybody will want to do this. Almost nobody wanted to do it. But we were I remember trying to convince, we would have 10 parents or 8 parents or 5 parents And we would try to convince each and every one, you have to do this. This is going to help your child, right? And that was clashing against a wall constantly. So even if we convinced the parents to do what we did, and we prepared everything so that they could do the same thing, we brought the program from the States 7 times to Portugal, etc. They didn't have the motivation, they didn't feel the need, they didn't have the hope, if you want, they didn't have the tools, the structure, the same ecosystem that me and my wife had to pull something crazy, like 32 hours per week during 2 years, right? So we put a lot of money, a lot of time into just replicating what we did at home, because we thought if it worked at home, it's going to work for everybody else. But we didn't, the big failure was not listening to the world. We had a mission of helping everybody, but we weren't listening to anybody.
When did you realize that? In what stage of the project?
When we were pouring money, we were losing money every month. Every time we brought the course from the United States, we would invest money and to help several dozens of families to attend. And then we thought, okay, that's not working after burning a lot of money. And we're not burning because we invested in many families, did profit a lot from that. And then we thought, okay, now we can do the therapies with the kids because we know how to do it with Gawi. We can do it with other children and teach other therapists to do the same. And we did that, but we thought everybody would pay the price. And we even got an office that was 3,000 square meters. Guys, imagine, we had a 3,000 square meter office because we thought it would be full with children with autism so that we can help them. We were only using 6 rooms, right? Because we didn't have enough. We didn't listen to them. We didn't realize yet that they didn't have the funds to do it. They weren't ready to understand that they needed an intensive therapy to help their children. They just thought, okay, or many people just think, okay, my child already does 45 minutes, 1 hour and a half of therapy per week, and that's what it is, that's what it's about. And they don't understand that there is a real possibility of their children evolving. It comes with a big investment, right? But we weren't listening to the people. We weren't understanding the market to reach our goal, which was always the same, which is helping everybody that has a child with autism. Back then, I don't know if these are failures or just part of the journey, which is we believed we were the solution. We believed the method we learned was the solution. And we took some time, and you were a key point in the switch. Remember the boot camp?
Yeah, I do.
And Fred was saying, why don't you guys do the methodology? Why don't you guys create something adapted to the market? And I was like, no, we can't. We're doing it this way, and this works, and this is the best there is, and there's nothing better than that, right? And so was that a failure, what we did before? I think it was just part of the journey. And then we learned, maybe the hard way, but we learned and we integrated in ourselves that that's not the way to help everybody.
Yeah.
That's the way to help some, but if our mission is to help everybody, we're gonna have to do some tweaking.
Okay,
You know?
there's 2 key ideas in what you just said that I think are really important here. The first one is that the failures, or how we perceive failures and how we feel failures, has pretty much to do with the expectations we generate based on our faith or on our passion. And that takes me to another thing, which is, and I don't know if you can see this graphic here. I'll show you a graphic. This is the graphic of the life cycle of the social entrepreneur. People who done the bootcamp of years know this graphic. So on the first stage, we typically design and pilot our solution. And then with the results of the pilot, we try to integrate them into a more developed model that we can deploy in the market, understanding the market as the beneficiaries. Mm-hmm. Then comes a point when we want to have more and more impact, because if the goal is impact, we want to reach more people in a more effective way, and we try to scale our project. And then the final goal of every social entrepreneur is dissemination, either by public policy adoption, mm-hmm. or because everyone is using you as a mainstream solution, as a dominant solution for solving their problems. And in each stage, in each different stage, you have some common failures or mistakes that that you typically do, and I would like to focus a bit on that. When I started Terra dos Sonhos, I was so in love and passionate about bringing change to the world, and of course specifically in love with my solution to deal with emotional health. I thought that creating impactful experiences of emotion, like dreams to children, would bring them, you know, a bonus in their well-being, and I was so in love with this that I made some amateur mistakes. Did this happen to you as well?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the big mistake was being in love with believing this was the solution. What we implemented would be the global solution for everybody. I think that was the biggest mistake. That was the greatest mistake of all, I think. The rest is, you know, mistakes like we thought it was a solution, so we continued pouring money inside. Okay,
so you lost a bunch of money just because you were too passionate to recognize that this was the solution.
Yeah, we helped people on the way, but we helped much less than we could have, probably.
Okay, well, one thing I did really well with my project when I started was communicating, and people fall in love with the idea of fulfilling dreams to sick children because, you know, it's a easy thing for people to create empathy. But there was a thing that, and this is a failure between, the difference between failing in outputs and failing in outcomes. Because my outcome was to transform the emotional health of the families with whom I worked. And I was being very successful in communicating because people, you know, were coming as volunteers. They found that the cause was really sweet. They called me the man of dreams, you know, and my ego was, wow, man of dreams. Not man of dreams in that sense, but man, you know, in charge of fulfilling dreams. And I felt that this was a failure. It helped me to fail a bit on adapting the model to have more impact because I was convinced that the success of the communication was the success of the cause. And it wasn't, because then, after 5 years of having Terra dos Sonhos, I made an inquiry to all the children and families I had worked with, and I understood that that experience that I had designed for them didn't transform their lives as a whole. It was only a good experience. It was useful. It brought happiness, but it didn't transform the way they saw themselves, the way they dealt with emotions. And this is really this was a big insight for me, because it helped me understand that when I started a social project, I thought I was being altruistic, and thinking that you're being good can be a deception of the ego. And it can lead you to several mistakes. And understanding that there is this deception was key for me, because when I started thinking about the impact and focusing on the impact only, the failures I had along the way with outputs, for instance, I did a workshop. I expected 30 people to be there, and there were 5. Okay, if I felt like the failure of the output was the failure of the mission, of the outcomes I wanted to implement, I would react in a different way. I would probably be blocked. I wouldn't be able to go on and move on. Do you feel the same? Did you feel the same?
Actually, when I started and coming from the for-profit world, I think if you're in the for-profit world, you're basically based on outputs. Outcome is not, it's not part of what you're doing, right? Only when you start to understand, and I think it takes some time to mature this idea of social impact, is when you start looking only at the outcome, right? You're saying you see the output as a way to reach the outcome. And yes, I mean, our output was when we were doing therapy with kids, 35 kids, and the output was helping 35 kids to reduce their autistic condition. That's it. I remember, and I regret very, very strongly, I remember telling a father, I don't care what you think, I'm here to work for your son. So I didn't understand yet the power of parents understanding a different way to deal with their children. right? That was a huge mistake. I think that's the biggest failure I ever did, was telling a father that I didn't care about him. I just cared about his son. But back then, that was the way I was seeing, I was reading what we were doing. I thought it was about the output, right? It was quantifying how much these children reduce their autistic condition without looking at the whole environment. Because I thought I thought we were the solution, right? And then when you start understanding the outcome part, that's when you start, okay, then you start, dealing with that. And then I have the same experience like you do a workshop, and we normally have 80, 90 people in our workshops, and then you have 20 people suddenly in the workshop, and you say, oh shit, what's going on? Yeah. But then one parent from the workshop, managed to do amazing things with their son in 3 weeks. And then you have other parents that are teaching teachers in school how they have to deal with children with autism. So the workshop where you had less people sometimes creates the biggest impact, right? Creates the biggest outcome. Right? And that's the beauty of social entrepreneurship, and the mystery, right? You never know what you're touching and what. And
that's not valid only for social entrepreneurship. I remember once I brought a professor from Harvard University to Portugal. His name is Vencer. By the way, he's going to be here tomorrow, speaking again in a conference that it's called Happy Conference. And I remember that he told the story when he first gave his course, and his course's name in Harvard is Happiness. And I remember he told us that the first year he gave the course in Harvard, he had 9 students. And at first, he was really disappointed, right? And really sad. And he thought, nobody wants to know about happiness after all. I have my expectations and my assumptions were wrong. Mm-hmm. So having optimistic assumptions is halfway to have failures or perception of failure, which is different. But the next year, he had 900 students.
Wow.
And he became the most assisted course in Harvard ever. And what he told is that if he had considered this a failure and had stayed in the negative emotional part of the perception of failure, he wouldn't be able to do what he did after. So of course he improved the contents, of course he improved the communication, but this is what failures do to you.
Yeah.
They force you, they create an incentive and a lever to be better tomorrow. And I have to tell this story about resilience and failure. So in Tale dos Sonhos, it was all about fulfilling the dreams of 6 children. Most of them were dying. And I remember when I started the project, I was really, really enthusiastic about the project, happy, and I wanted to prove my concept. So I started fulfilling some dreams. And my first dream was a little boy, and he had a dream of going to a football club, stadium, and meeting the players, and staying with them for a while. And I prepared everything in 2 days, and I thought, oh, this output is brilliant, man, because I did this in 2 days. I can do this. And then on the day that I was supposed to fulfill the dream, I went to the hospital, and he wasn't there, and the father called the hospital, and the kid had died during the evening. So my first dream, I didn't fulfill it because the kid died. And I had 2 options with this fact. First, emotionally, if you ask me, I was in, really bad shape. But then, during the day, I started thinking, and I talked to friends. And there was one friend who told me a story, and he told me, listen, my son asked me to go out with his bike today, and I said, no, sorry, you can't because it's too late now. And he asked me, what if tomorrow is too late again? And the point of he telling me this story was to make me think that this failure had a function, a specific function of asking me, are you ready to embrace what's coming? Are you ready to go through with your project, even knowing that you have people that don't like it, you will have obstacles.
Right.
And this was really quite life-changing for me. It was in the beginning, but it changed the way I saw things.
Exactly.
So from that moment on, every time I had a step back, I would think, okay, what can I do better? What can I do better tomorrow? How can I improve this? How can I create plans? How can I create strategies, mechanisms to not only to accept the failures, because I think this is the key, accepting that failures exist, but understanding them as key leverage for our capabilities.
Yeah.
And talking about that and coming back a bit back, I just wanted to share this experience because I think it's
Beautiful.
a really strong experience and it changed a lot.
Yeah.
Do you think that if the optimistic assumptions and the impacts and the outcomes are what social entrepreneurs must focus on, do you think that if you have a more solid theory of change, you will be better prepared not only for failures, but for the way you deal with them?
Yeah.
And how? How do you think?
Yeah, because I think at the end of the day, failure is our opinion about things that happen, right? And it's like a negative. I think that didn't work out. We're not looking into the broad potentiality of the teachings or the learnings from that specific moment, right? The thing is, with the theory, having a clear theory of change, you know what your mission is, and it's aligned, and you're placing all your activities to achieve a certain outcome. So as we were speaking about the output and the outcome, you're very conscious because you're only looking for the outcome result. The output is there, but you're focusing on, okay, is the outcome happening? Now, I have to bring in one issue, which is the struggle I believe that, I don't know, most of us social entrepreneurs and social innovation projects have, which is the balance between output and outcome. Because at the end of the day, you need an output which usually creates the sustainability. Usually, at least in our project, sustainability doesn't come from the outcome. It comes from the output. Because
you don't sell impact, you sell like workshops or tools.
Exactly. Yeah. So we need that. In our case, we're looking for solutions, and that's the struggle. How can we find solutions that are the output and generate directly the outcome, like a workshop?
Yeah, what you're saying is that the key challenge in social entrepreneurs is to have a right trade-off between the business model and the impact model. Yeah. And you can have an hybrid model, you can have an embedded model, or you can have a model where business, we have side business that contribute to the main mission, right?
And that's where I see the biggest struggle. Now, if your theory of change, coming back to the question, if it's clear, then I think you're going to look at failure from the bright side, and say, okay, we're learning from that. And how does this help me in my mission? How does this help me with my mission? How does this help me with my mission?
Yeah, because for many, what's interesting in social projects is that your theory of change changes as you implement it in the field, and because you have to learn from it every time. So what do you think are the main mistakes that people do when they design their pilots and after they want to integrate in a model? What do you think are the most common mistakes that they make in this process?
I mean, I think one of them is believing their solution is the right one. I think seeing competition, but at the same time, you have the competition side, and at the same time, you have others that are maybe copying from the competition. They see, oh, it's working for the competition, so let's do that, right? Which is a little deviation from really just sticking to their mission.
What else? Do you think that the optimistic assumptions that they have from the beginning don't allow them to design the model properly? Yes. Do you think they close their eyes and get blinded?
If you're blinded by your own solution, if you believe your own solution is the best, or just it's limiting, because you have to stay open to everything that's going on, and especially us. We're out there, all of us, and I believe everybody that's watching. We're here to change the world in a positive way, and so it's about finding the way to help everybody. So it's about understanding everybody, right? And so I think it's in that line of thought.
Well, when I teach students about social entrepreneurship, I talk about a lot about communication, and I tell them that you could have the biggest idea in the world, the best project in the world. If you don't know how to communicate it properly, or if you don't communicate it at all, it doesn't exist. Do you want to share some typical mistakes that you did with the communication?
Yeah, absolutely. Also believing that my solution is the best.
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay.
That's the key point
That
here.
was my biggest.
That's the self-belief.
Now understanding that, then I was always also understanding, for example, when you prepare a proposal, or you're looking for social investors, or you're, I don't know, trying to get funds or applying for some project. It's an exercise that you have to do, and I think it takes a lot of time. And at least I'm a natural born communicator. However, I spend a lot of time to convey an idea of a project, because it's very difficult. You have people, this is like when you prepare a CV, a curriculum vitae, and you're applying for a job, you have to really stick to basics, because if you give all the details, you know, whoever's reading it will get lost. And the same way when you're communicating anything you need, whether you're in a negotiation, or whether you're asking for funds, or whether you're trying to share with a parent how he can deal better with his son with autism. It's about keeping it really simple. But to keep it really simple, you have to really know what you want to
what theory of change again.
What you want to convey, and how it can impact. So you're gonna have to communicate in a very simple form. And one thing very, very important, which I was not using, you have to listen more. So you have to go it's not about going into a meeting and saying, this is the best project in the world. This is what I used to do. This is the best project in the world. You got to buy it. We only need 30,000 euro. Never got the 30,000 euro. Now I learned you have to go in, you have to drink a coffee. Hey, what are you guys about? What are you doing? So it takes time.
It's about dating and creating a relationship.
Exactly.
Right?
You have to create a relationship. The goal is not just the goal is to create the relationship. And then if what you're looking for is funds or whatever, they will appear from wherever they have to appear.
Yeah.
Meaning you have to date with, this is a little bit different than husband and wife. You have to date with many. Social impact world, we have to date. We have many wives or many lovers, let's say, and you have to keep them all happy.
All happy, yeah.
And then only whenever they want, then we're available to
I can share
create impact together.
I can share one mistake I did, and one thing that happened to me was, and this is the last point, because then I want to open to participants for them to do the questions they want. But I remember that when I started with Terra de Chões, I went to companies and tried to sell my impact and the mission and the vision. And some of the companies were totally inflexible and didn't understand at all what I was talking about. There was a huge gap in language and frameworks. And I remember leaving the meetings, and I was not only frustrated, but angry at them. And I would say things like, but are they dumb? Or am I not communicating properly? But I was basically very furious with the outcome of meetings. When I started understanding that the mistake wasn't me, actually, because not only because of the optimistic assumptions, but I was not trying to find common grounds. Mm-hmm. I was selling them an idea as it was so good that I didn't have to prove anything to anyone, and I didn't have to prove the win-wins that it could have. And now, for instance, in Generation Portugal, I won't tell the name of the company, but 1 year and a half ago, I started talking to this company, and only now I'm going to do the first project. Mm-hmm. And because I understood that the meetings that didn't work, meanwhile, were not failures. Mm-hmm. They were a path that was being built step by step to come to an outcome.
Yeah.
And this was really a very good insight I had along the years as well in the relationship with investors and partners.
Right.
So I would like to open to questions. I already have some questions here from participants, but I would like to understand if you have any more besides this one. Okay, how do you build your relationships with stakeholders, in particular those who supported you financially and the customers? Joe?
How do you build your
wanna jump in?
relationship with stakeholders? Okay, we have many. I mean,
From
that's
Patricia.
Patricia, thank you for the question, because that's one of the main things I'm struggling with right now, which is I reassessed the whole strategy of Vencer Autismo. We reassessed the whole strategy, and I came to the conclusion that we have to go out and look for more funds because we have beautiful projects happening and beautiful ideas. However, I was not taking care of my relationship with stakeholders. So I wasn't caring for the relationship with actual stakeholders. I wasn't caring for the relationship with future stakeholders. We were just focusing on getting our job done, which is, in this case, okay, it's an output with a great outcome, but we want more. And to get more and to reach more and to expand more, we need more funds. This is very simple. So I have a really bad example. I am a bad example of building relationship with my stakeholders. But Patricia, I would love to speak with you in a year from now, because I'm starting the steps to really focus on this part and date a bunch of stakeholders, social investors, etc., to find the common ground where our projects add value to also their mission and their beliefs and the way they see the world. And we have incredible projects going on, and I'm sure that many will be happy to work with us. But if I don't go and have a coffee with them, it's impossible.
I think the key is what you're saying. I think the key is the value proposition. And having a proper value proposition to every partner that you try to bring in implies that you are empathic, meaning that you put yourself in his shoes.
Yeah.
So you have to understand his business. You have to understand where he is at. And after that, you have to know a bit about what he has done in the last years, how the business has done his evolution on the CSR and other strategies that somehow touch what you're doing. And then you do the finding the common ground spot.
Exactly.
And then you have to be really patient and very bold and trying to get your opportunity. I think that's basically it.
I'm going to add with an example, because yesterday I was with a social investor. I was having dinner, and then I was commenting. I just came from a meeting with the Escola Superior de Saúde, ESMAD, SAGE Foundation, because we got the funds to create an autism virtual reality project, which is really cool. And then this woman says, "Okay, so you got the money?" I say, "No, that's not the money from the project that we need the money from you. This is the money for another project." "Oh, you have more projects." What I'm trying to get to is we have several projects, but we try to just address each potential investor with the one that fits them. And the conversation is extremely necessary. You have to speak with them, understand what they're about. And then if we gave them the 8 projects we have in mind and we have in development, they would say, "Okay, Joe, come another day because that's too much." Yeah. So it's about listening. It's about listening more than just speaking.
Active listening.
Yeah.
Okay, James, do you use stakeholder maps, stakeholder value maps, and do you co-create with all stakeholders and users? Well, James, I will answer that. In my case, in Junior Achievement Portugal, actually 2 weeks ago, I brought together all my stakeholders, which are basically companies, schools, students, and alumni. And I brought them together in an afternoon of work in order to help me design solutions for the biggest challenges of the organization. And this was a co-creation maps, co-creation activity that was very useful, but it's only useful if after that you do a summary of it and you have a follow-up done of the implementation of the ideas that you developed and co-created with stakeholders. I do have stakeholder maps. I do use the value maps because it's key for me to have my 39 companies involved all the time and they are my associates. They pay me fees between 5Ks and 30K every year, and of course for me it's absolutely key. Yeah,
That's what I strive for, having 30 something associates that give between 5K and 30K. One day. Super cool.
James has another question. How do you shift the mindset from funding reliance to entrepreneurial value creation? Joe, you want to add something?
Oh man,
That's a very good
because
question.
I think it depends. It depends on the project, and it depends on the situation. We're developing many projects without the funding because otherwise they wouldn't start happening.
Mhm.
And then we have others that we're just waiting for the funding to start them. I'll give another example. For example, autism and virtual reality. This is an idea I had like 4 years ago. I wanted to create some video in virtual reality that you can use a mobile phone and with some cardboard glasses, which are really simple to produce and to deliver to all schools, so that every child in Portugal will have the experience of being autistic through this experience. But I needed a 360-degree of filming, whatever, and then somebody had to edit, and the lights and the sounds, and it was very expensive. I didn't have the funds to do that, and okay, just didn't manage to get this together. But then in conversations and dating with our friends and everything, I meet Escola Superior de Saúde, Politécnico de Porto, and they say, we just bought this material, this equipment to film in 360 degrees, right? And I'm going like, whoa, you can do this. Yes. They say, we have this project, but actually we can adapt it to autism, but we only need an amount of money, that they said. And at that moment, we had this contest going on with Saj, and then I put this project in there, and Saj says, here you go, here's the money. Just go for it. And then suddenly we have a solution that was just waiting for the funding. And the moment we got the funding, it was a matter of 2 months. It was incredible. From the moment I met Escola Superior de Saúde to having the funds, and actually yesterday afternoon was the kickoff. So I would say it depends on the project. It depends on the situation. But I think that's the biggest, in my case, my biggest struggle is always finding the sustainability, the funding to create the value, or create first the value to get the funding.
What is the value talking about? Impact. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have only time for one last question. Right? We still have 15 minutes? Good. So Patricia, let's answer first Sarah, because we already answered one from Patricia. Sarah, what was your most significant experience with an autistic child, and did you read Henry Newman?
Okay. Well, thank you, Sarah, for the comment. I mean, the most significant experience was with my stepdaughter, which is Kawi, because I spent hours and hours and hours and hours working one-on-one with her. She's the one who taught me to really be a better person. She's the one who taught me the beauties of life. She's the one who helped me change from this for-profit attitude to a common good. She's a small Buddha that we have at home. Well, not small, she's taller than I am. She's like a Buddha at home, and
she's a hurricane.
She's a hurricane.
Yeah.
It's the most significant experience with her was it wasn't because often if you speak with somebody that worked with children with autism, they won't tell you that the most awesome thing they did was help their child become less autistic, right? Because that's what people think. They think, oh man, and he worked with a stepdaughter, and his stepdaughter is completely functional now and completely autonomous. Wow, right? That's not the transformation. The transformation is how I transformed from spending hours and hours and hours being in a room with Kawi and just going, seeing the small, tiny millimetrical victories by just working with her with full love and acceptance, and realizing autism has these things. You only achieve, you only advance when you demand less from them. This is a really cool concept. So when you accept more, things happen. it's something really cool. It happens with any human being. And this is what autism, especially what I lived personally with Kawi. I've done sessions also with other children, but of course never so intense and so many hours like I did with Kawi. And right now I don't remember Henry Newman. Maybe if I see some book or something, I'll click back into it. But I'll check it out. I'll check out. Okay.
Patricia.
Oh, that's what Henry Newman says. Okay, cool.
Patricia, more general question: do you involve interns in your daily operations, or do you prefer to have a full professional crew at first? Well, actually, the other day I was giving a training on scaling and what's scalability, and I was saying that in different stages of the project, you have different needs. And normally, when you start a project, especially if it's an impact project, you don't have many resources. So you usually want people that are agile, multitasking, that are doers, people that can, play all games. They're, like able to do everything, because what you want, you're eager to implement, to try, and to learn from what you're trying. So I think the only moment you can think about having a more professional crew, and in fact, you must have one, is when you scale activities. Because when you scale activities, you have to grow your impact, you have to grow your reach, but you have to maintain costs the same way. So you need people who are professional, who can work on processes, who can, focus more, be more specialized. So I would say that in the mid stage of the project, normally you start thinking about having a crew, a more professional crew. I don't know your experience, but
it's the same thing. I mean, I have a list of professional profiles that we want to hire, but we can't hire. Like fundraising. I would love to have a professional fundraiser, somebody that already knows how to do it. Because we reach so many people, we have so many followers. This is amazing. All you social projects out there. Facebook anniversaries. So people, when it's their birthday, they ask for money in Facebook for Vencer Autismo. We're making 3K per month, 3,000 euro per month. That's what's keeping us alive, basically. Amazing, huh? You see? So jump into that. If you guys have big projects reaching a bunch of people, activate, write to Facebook and say that your institution is ready to captivate those funds, because it works. I have some profiles like for communication, for fundraising, which you need professional profiles to really.
Yeah, what you do normally is you externalize that, right? And you try to outsource.
Yeah, those. At the beginning, we're outsourcing, and then we see that's another bet that can lead to a failure, which would be, okay, should we invest in this? But money is very tight in social projects.
Yeah, and, but social projects are made of people, so people are always the best investment in a social project. But you have stages, so you have to have a rationale behind it. Okay, I had an example of a friend who set up a platform for corporate volunteers a few years ago, and he started off with a huge team of very qualified people with huge investors like business angels, and it was an impact project. Of course, 2 years after, he bankrupt, and the project didn't work anymore because he went too fast, and he didn't manage to implement his model the right way, even with the best qualified people, because I think he had an assumption about the expectations of corporations and volunteers that wasn't real. So it's a very good example of how money and qualifications can help you if you don't adjust your expectations and you get real about what your model is capable of doing in the real life, in the field, right? I have one last question, which is a really good last question. So I think we can finish up with this one. And the question is, it's not easy to answer. Okay. The question is fail often and fail fast really true, a really true way to success?
I think it was I think James, he was writing, fail often and fail small. It was fail often and fail fast. If it's
fail often and fail fast. Is it the way for success?
I mean, I believe we should experiment more. It just takes it's an extra effort that you have to do, right? Because testing things is not just testing, right? So you have to prepare something, put it out and communicate, and it's not as simple as just, okay, now I'm going to test, going into a conference and then speaking about something different.
Yeah, it's time costly. Yeah.
So, but I do believe if we tested more things, we would probably advance somewhat faster. Testing with, measuring the outcome. So you're testing and you're measuring and testing, and not be afraid to test some things. There we enter this part of the boomerang effect of communicating in a competitive place where somebody could misunderstand this. But
fail
I think
often,
we have to test more.
Fail often, fail fast is just the other side, the other face of test often and test fast, right?
Exactly.
So it's a bit like it's the experimental method that scientists use. And of course, as in any reality, the experience curve makes you do less failures as you go along. So I think this is especially true, the fail often and fail fast part, especially true when you're starting a project. When you're starting and you try to you experiment things.
Yeah, that's important.
Because then if you have a more mature model and the market knows you and you have a base of awareness which is bigger, iterate often, of course. And these projects iterate a lot. So they go further, they come back, and then you change it, and then you think about it again.
Yeah.
But I think that in the beginning of the project, you can fail often and fail fast, and you should. But in the middle of the process, when you're trying to scale, for instance, a project, is probably you will fail in some methods of scaling. But once you get in the market and you have a great awareness, you can't allow yourself to fail so much, or at least not in the same form. So it's absolutely necessary that you start learning from your mistakes and do that process as a system. That continuous improvement methodology that they use in industries should be also applied in our projects, which is clearly develop tools to identify mistakes, identify errors, have some indicators that can show you deviations in the number or in the way people evaluate your activities that can show that you're not going the right way. Have some, preventive measures that can help you focus the business again on the right place. And of course, try to develop faster the tools to identify this the more you can. So I think basically it's this. James has early failure is much less costly
To correct.
Joe?
Yes, I agree.
The risk is lower and it doesn't cost so much.
I'll give an example. Our institution is called Vencer Autismo. It means defeat autism, right? Nowadays, that wouldn't be our name. Our name would be understand autism or love autism, right?
Yeah.
And many people say, why are you guys trying, you're giving a message of accepting and understanding, and now you're trying to defeat this. But we started, trying to defeat that. So maybe that it was even a failure, the name we have. But now it's so well known that we're not ready to change. But yes, if you change before, it's easier.
Joe,
Fred,
thank you. Big hug. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Everybody.
Thank you.